This is the last bartender. We're gonna be doing a little absinthe tasting today. Absinthe, give it a little bit of history. They came up with it in, I think, Sweden. The French, of course, made it famous. They brought it over to the French Quarter in New Orleans, and some of our greatest cocktails. One of my favorite cocktails. My only real drink that I go out of my way to get that is a whiskey-based cocktail is a Sazerac, and that, of course, has the serious coating of absinthe on the glass, and it makes a big difference in the cocktail. I can take or leave an old-fashioned. Good one is great, but after a couple sips, I'm like, yeah, this is cool, but Sazerac, there's something about it. I love them. Pernod Ricard, this is actually a bottle of Pernod that's pre-2007. It's an old-looking bottle, you can see, which means this is one of the bottles that says yellow number 5 on it, alcohol with natural flavors, certified colors. That means this is not the real recipe. This is the stuff that you're used to drinking now. Is the original recipe of Pernod, who is, I guess, the first mass distiller of absinthe, and I believe that was in France, so they can take credit for that. But it's super high proof, and when people try to get this green color, they'll do it with things with like copper if they're bootlegging it. And so there's lots of different theories on why people went crazy or thought they went crazy, but it's just because it's 65% alcohol by volume. It's like 130 proof. That's high potency booze. So if you're used to drinking a little bit of wine and then you drink a couple absinthe and take your clothes off and go dancing on your neighbor's table, I mean, it makes sense. That's just the way alcohol works. And then, of course, I forget the name of the louse. If I try to pronounce it, I will totally butcher it. But it was in the 1880s in France, and this bug went through the vineyards, and it literally took out certain varieties of grapes that were used for wines and stuff, and while they were recovering and while they were in that period when they couldn't get anything because all of the vineyards, all the grapes had died, people started drinking absinthe, and the grape producers, the wine producers got scared, and they jumped on the bandwagon. And before that, it's just like most alcohols and bitters and things like that, it was for medicinal use. People used it for medicinal purposes, and it was a drink of society. It was a drink of poets. It was a drink of artists. And it got this bad name because of this. It was the Lamprey murders, where this guy killed his family. He was a drunk. He'd been drinking all day, been drinking all week, been drinking his whole life, and he had 2 glasses of absinthe in between beer and brandy and everything else he could get his hands on. And his wife was like, "You're a bum. You're a derelict. You have a job, but you suck, and we don't like you." And so he killed his entire family. Murder happens every day. It's not because of video games. It's not because of stuff like this. It's not because of that satanic rock and roll music. And it's not because of absinthe. It's not because of wormwood. In order to get enough wormwood in you to give you any kind of poisoning, you'd die of alcohol poisoning first. So it's not a thing. Okay, off the soapbox. So, how you drink absinthe is typically you're in your bar and you have an absinthe fountain. You have your... the hell is this thing called? Whatever, you rest your sugar cube on it. I got a real stony one. It's got all these different, like, little... that's for your sugar cube. And you have your sugar cube. And then you have this little guy. This is something that I've never really seen before, except for I picked it up a while back, and somebody had to show me how to use it. And it's just a cute little fountain thing. It might be better just to drop the cube in there and pour the cold water on it. No, because that's how you do absinthe. You have the sugar cube, because absinthe's such high proof. You have cold water, and you just pour it over it. You put the absinthe in first, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to make it a fat one, just because I feel like it. We're going to pour 2 ounces in there. Got a little happy there, kids. So when you're done with this, it should come out like a creamy colored. I want to put it this way a little because I know the way this thing works, and it's Gotta angle it that way a little bit because of the way this little guy works. All right. Slowly drip in water. I can just fill this thing up here and it'll go on its own. So you see sometimes in a bar people will light this on fire because you can, but see the sugar cube just slowly going? See how it's getting to be a creamy color? It looks like this carries the perfect amount of water for 1 glass of absinthe. Almost through with the sugar cube, almost through with the water. See that milky, creamy color? The Green Fairy. That is really cool. Can't tell how much water's left in there. That's it. I think there's a little more in there, but it's not coming out. All right, that's good. So, then you take your little absinthe spoon and you give it a little stir. One glass of absinthe. And you shouldn't have any sugar chunks in the bottom. So you give it a little scrape around the bottom edges. Let's give this thing a try. The anise is just intense. That's what I like about the Sazerac is you get a little hint of that. It is really intense in this glass. It like it burns your eyes almost. Tasting. First taste doesn't count. With this stuff, I don't know. I think it's gonna be the first taste. Coat the mouth, but you don't need to. This is just aha! Oh man. It's too much for me. I know that might not be hip to say, but in a cocktail, give me a Corpse Reviver #2. Give me that Sazerac. By itself, straight like this, all this stuff is super cool, but it's too intense for me. The black licorice flavor is kind of overpowering for me. So it doesn't taste much different than the new version, which is actually the old version that has the wormwood and all of that. The anise and black licorice, it's really just too much for me. So I think I'm gonna call it at just that. Well, okay, one more little tiny sip. Woo! Yeah, as an addition to a cocktail, there's nothing better. By itself, I'm not cool enough. This is the last bartender. Happy drinking.